Hey there! Welcome to our channel Sleeping Pill, where stories drift softly into the night. I'm Michael, your companion on this slow journey into sleep. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let this gentle story carry you towards sleep. Tonight we wander somewhere unexpected. The kind of place where the past gets dust in your sandals and time slows down like it has better things to do. Picture ancient Rome, but not the dramatic Rome from textbooks or documentaries. No gladiators shouting, no emperors yelling orders, no epic battles. Just the normal Rome, the ordinary Rome. The one with crowded fruit stalls and vendors yelling about figs, the one with people forgetting what they came to buy, the one with dusty sandals and sensible linen clothes. And right there, in the middle of that daily noise, something quietly romantic happens, so gentle that if you blink, you might miss it. You probably won't survive this, by the way. It's dangerously wholesome. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, type your location and the time where you are right now. I love seeing how far this sleepy little channel reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're weaving through the market of ancient Rome, pretending you're there just for figs. Not because figs are your favorite, they're perfectly fine but not life-changing, but because they're the most socially acceptable excuse to be out here rather than working or cleaning or doing something productive. The market is busy, like every day. Hawkers are shouting prices that you don't quite believe. Someone is haggling over olives like they're ancient relics. And you, absolutely minding your own business, barely paying attention, bump directly into someone. Your shoulder brushes theirs, not dramatically, not poetic, just accidental. You turn and see a face that doesn't belong to a vendor, not a merchant, not a soldier, someone quieter, someone who looks like they'd rather discuss stars in history than argue about fruit. Their robe is simple but neat. Their hair is slightly messy, like thinking outruns grooming. You try to step aside, but you both step in the same direction. The clumsy side shuffle happens. You both laugh quietly, like two people who haven't had a proper conversation yet, but already know you're not enemies. "I was just buying figs," they say, raising a little basket like a proof of mission. You nod, like you were also totally here for figs. You even look down at your hand, which contains one fig, slightly bruised, as if to confirm that yes, obviously, this was your intention from the beginning. Then something simpler than anything you've experienced in Rome happens. You speak, not planned, not rehearsed, just honest. "That's a good vendor," you say, pointing to the one behind you. "They don't cheat on the scale." The stranger nods. "I know. I come here often." That's it. Not philosophical, not poetic, just a tiny exchange, but it hangs in the air in that comfortable way. Like two people who don't need to pretend anything grand, just a fruit discussion between two humans standing in the dust. You start to step away because this is Rome, and people don't linger in the middle of walkways unless they're starting fights or trading gossip. But then the stranger asks, "Would you recommend anything else?" You blink. You try not to blush like someone who has been complimented indirectly. You scan the stalls like you actually know what's good here. Then you point to pomegranates. They nod. They choose one carefully, as if honoring your suggestion. And suddenly you feel irrationally proud, like you invented the pomegranate personally. You offer advice about how to check ripeness. They thank you. The conversation lasts maybe 30 seconds, but it lands like something meaningful. Just as they turn to go, you notice something tucked under their arm. A scroll. Not the beautiful kind with illustrations, a working scroll. One that looks used, smudged, maybe reread too many times. You don't ask about it, you don't pry, but you notice. Just like they notice you noticing. And they smile again. Not widely, not theatrically, just enough to make you feel that something might have begun. Something tiny, something unexpected, something that wasn't planned. They walk away slowly, leaving you standing in the ancient dust of Rome, with a bruised fig, a pomegranate, and the vague, confusing feeling that something has shifted in your day. You pretend you don't look back, but you do. Because of course you do. It's Rome, not the dramatic Rome of legends, but just the soft one where tiny connections matter more than epic battles ever will. And without realizing it, you start paying attention to footsteps, to market sounds, to the curve of time, because a memory has just begun, and you don't know it yet. But this little bump, this little brush of shoulders, this tiny excuse to talk about figs, it will follow you far longer than you expect. You don't expect to see them again so soon. Rome is big enough, and the marketplace is chaotic enough, that bumping into someone twice feels like the city itself is nudging you. You're back near the fig stall, not because figs suddenly became your life's mission, but because the place feels familiar in a way that's starting to make your routine suspicious. There they are, looking at olives like they're debating ancient philosophy instead of snack options. You pretend to be extremely focused on the pears, which frankly aren't even that good this season. But regardless, you hold one up, as though weighing both the fruit and your dignity. They notice you. They don't say anything right away. They just tilt their head with that mild recognition, like someone spotting a familiar stray cat that keeps hanging around the same alley. You attempt small talk to save face, something about how crowded it is today, which is a lie, because it looks exactly the same as yesterday. They chuckle quietly, the kind of laugh that sounds like someone exhaling all their stress. Then, before you can think of a better distraction or pretend that you're a fig connoisseur with deep market expertise, they speak. "I didn't catch your name yesterday." Your brain panics slightly, not in a bad way, more like, "Oh great, now I have to respond like a functioning human." You give your name. Simple, honest, not dramatic. Just the truth spoken in the middle of the fruit aisle where lives apparently intersect now. Then they respond. "I'm Lucius." The name lands gently, not pushy, not heavy, just a name spoken with enough confidence that you can tell they've said it thousands of times, but never like this. Not to you, not here, not as a beginning to something neither of you has defined. Lucius. It rings in your head with annoying persistence. The kind of name you know you will end up thinking about while shelving scrolls or reorganizing your laundry. They smile politely, the market noise swirling around you both, and ask what you're buying today. That's when you realize you have no idea why you're here. You were supposed to get olives, or figs, or something vegetable adjacent, but your brain refuses to produce the answer. Pears, you lie, still holding the bruised fruit like it's a prized jewel. Lucius nods politely, clearly seeing through you, but not calling you out on it. You place the pear in your basket just to commit to the deception. Lucius adjusts the scroll under his arm, then glances around as though searching for something. You assume they're about to leave, and you manage not to look disappointed which is a personal emotional achievement. But instead of leaving, they lean a little closer, not invasively, just enough that the noise of the marketplace fades a bit. You know, I'm here almost every morning. You blink. They just admitted it. They might as well have handed you a scroll reading, "I enjoy seeing you." But neither of you is dramatic enough to say that out loud. So you respond with equal subtlety. "Oh, I'm here often too." This is a lie. You don't usually visit the market every morning, but guess who will from now on? Yes, you, because apparently your emotional stability now depends on Roman figs and one quiet scholar who knows the correct price of olives. Lucius doesn't push the conversation further. They don't ask questions about your life or your job or your philosophical stance on pear ripeness. They simply nod, as though acknowledging that something mutual and unspoken has been established. You realize then that you're not merely remembering their name, you're holding it in your chest like a secret. Lucius. Rome fades a bit in that moment. The arguing vendors, the dusty road, the noisy barter, all of it becomes background noise. What matters is the simple truth that you're here, and so were they. Lucius picks up a loaf of bread, pays the vendor, and gives you a small nod like, "We're done pretending this is nothing." Then they step aside, leaving space for someone else to approach the stall. You could walk away then. You should walk away. That would be the normal, socially acceptable, emotionally safe choice. But Rome isn't built on safe decisions, and neither, apparently, are you. You turn to leave, but not before saying, "Maybe I'll see you tomorrow." Lucius smiles. Not widely, not dramatically, but with that quiet certainty that tells you they heard more than just words. "Maybe," they say. It's the best yes you've heard in years. You walk away, basket in hand, pear commitment and all, pretending you're still thinking about fruit prices. But you know what you're really thinking about. Lucius. The name you pretended not to treasure the moment you heard it. The name that will sit in your chest like a bookmark. Waiting. You're not trying to look for Lucius the next morning. Absolutely not. You are simply being a good Roman citizen by showing up early to buy produce the way any reasonable, responsible adult would. You are not peeking toward the olive stall or lingering unnecessarily near the bread table or pretending to inspect fabric just because it happens to face the direction where Lucius might appear. No, not you. You are calm, you are composed, you are... Okay, fine, you're looking for them. You try to convince yourself you're not disappointed when your eyes sweep the marketplace and they're nowhere in sight. You busy yourself browsing dates, casually, like someone who totally didn't walk faster than usual to get here. Minutes pass. You talk yourself down. Maybe Lucius is busy. Maybe they overslept. Maybe they're writing something important. Maybe they're at the olive stall right now behind someone tall. And there they are, walking straight toward you, holding two scrolls tucked neatly under one arm and a loaf of bread balanced like Roman multitasking poetry. They spot you too, not in a dramatic wave or exaggerated reaction, just a softened expression, like the morning light suddenly got warmer. You raise your eyebrows in that fake, "Oh, fancy seeing you here" gesture that fools no one. Lucius responds with, "Good morning," the way a librarian greets a regular visitor who keeps returning without ever checking out a book. You both buy what you need, or more accurately, what you can justify purchasing, so you can stay in proximity without appearing unhinged. Then you both drift toward the road that leads away from the market. Here's the interesting part. Neither of you asks the other to walk together. You just do. Side by side, matching pace without negotiation. Not too close to invade space, not too far to seem distant. Just right. Like two people accidentally locked into the same rhythm. Rome wakes around you. The cobblestones feel cooler in the shade, warmer where sunlight strikes. Laundry flaps from second-floor balconies, and the smell of fresh bread follows you long after the bakery fades behind you. Someone is feeding pigeons, and the sound of sandals scraping stone creates an oddly comforting playlist of footsteps. Neither of you speaks for a while, and honestly, you don't need to. Sometimes silence is easier than conversation. Sometimes silence is conversation. You steal a sideways glance, watching Lucius as they seem to notice every tiny detail around them. A cat napping on a doorstep, the faint imprint of a chariot wheel in drying mud, or the way vines creep over old stone walls. Lucius has that look. Someone who thinks deeply without needing to announce it. Someone who sees poetry where others see dust. You're not in danger of falling for that, though. No, you are perfectly rational, perfectly grounded, absolutely immune to quiet charm and ancient sidewalk companionship. Sure. The stroll continues, and eventually you feel like you should say something, anything, because silence is starting to feel like a secret you haven't earned yet. "It's cooler today," you offer, testing the waters of conversation, like dipping your toe into a cold fountain. Lucius smiles faintly. "It is. Good walking weather." You nod as though you personally negotiated with the gods for these temperatures. A vendor shouts prices behind you, a horse clops past, a child runs, giggling, chasing a dog with more enthusiasm than balance. Life moves, but you and Lucius move slower, as if Rome has switched modes just for you two. Something subtle clicks in place, a routine you didn't plan, a routine that isn't a routine yet, just the whisper of one. Halfway down the street, Lucius adjusts the scrolls under her arm and looks over, casual as a breeze. You walk this way often? You consider saying yes, even though the truth is more like, only today because you're here. But you don't want to jump from fig acquaintance to life partner in one conversational leap. So you shrug lightly and reply, "Sometimes. It's a nice path." Lucius nods thoughtfully. "It is. That's it. No romantic declarations, no epic revelations, just two people walking the same street because the universe said so." As you reach the corner where your paths will diverge, you expect Lucius to keep walking straight while you turn left. But Lucius stops, offers a soft, unassuming farewell like they're not asking, just testing if the rhythm will continue. Your answer is quiet but certain. "Until tomorrow." You walk away, pretending not to replay the moment like some awkward romantic drama scripted by the gods, but you do. Of course you do. Rome is massive, life is unpredictable, people cross paths and drift apart, but something about this stroll feels like the beginning of something quietly impossible. Not loud, not flashy, not planned, just right. The next morning, you don't plan to be early. Really, you don't. You've told yourself you're going to live a non-delusional life. You are going to maintain emotional stability. You are definitely not reorganizing your morning just to show up a little sooner. And yet, you find yourself there again, collecting figs like someone who's auditioning for Roman Fruit Buyer of the Year. Lucius emerges from behind the stall with a small cloth bag of olives, spotting you almost immediately. Neither of you does the exaggerated, "Ooh, fancy meeting you" routine today. You're past that. The universe already blew your cover. You exchange soft greetings. There's a pause, not awkward, just familiar. You fall into step, heading out of the bustling market, slipping into something quieter. You say nothing for the first few minutes. Lucius says nothing. The silence isn't defensive, it's cooperative. Like you both agreed not to ruin the moment with unnecessary words. When you finally speak, it's because the moment almost demands commentary. It gets noisy earlier every day, you say, glancing back at the chaos of vendors still battling over customers. Lucius nods. We could go around the north wall. It's quieter. You raise a curious eyebrow. There's a path there? Lucius gestures ahead with the loaf they're holding like a pointing device. There's an orchard. The road's less used. An orchard? Outside the crowded streets? Why does that sound suspiciously like a scene from a romantic mosaic? But you don't argue. You simply adjust your direction, letting Lucius guide you past carts and stray chickens, yes, actual stray chickens, until the stone buildings thin and the city wall's familiar curve rises into view. Then you see it. A pathway shaded by overhanging branches, lined with dusty shrubs, leading toward a small orchard that looks like it was dropped there by a tired deity who wanted a private place to nap. The noise of the city evaporates. The clatter of sandals fades. The market shouts dissolve. Even the persistent pigeon chatter softens. Here, there's just breeze, dry grass, and the dusty smell of fruit trees, figs and olives sharing space like they signed a peace treaty. You walk side by side, slower than yesterday, because today the silence feels earned. Lucius glances at the orchard ahead. My father used to bring me here. We'd read. He wasn't very good at farming. You laugh softly. So naturally he chose a librarian. Lucius shrugs, offering a crooked grin. He said books grow better than crops if watered properly. Is wisdom the water, you ask, trying to sound philosophical and only half succeeding. Lucius thinks for a moment. Maybe patience. You both walk with that answer hanging in the warm air. Patience. You can't explain why it fits, but it does. You reach a fig tree that casts a wide shadow, and, without agreement, you both slow to a stop. The earth beneath is soft but dry. The branches hang low enough to brush your shoulders if you wanted to. What do you like about this place, you ask? Lucius considers. No one lies here. That catches you off guard. No one lies? Lucius nods. People lie in the city, in markets, at home. Here, you don't need to say anything. You look around, absorbing the quiet. The orchard feels like an unspoken truth. That's oddly comforting, you admit. Lucius smiles gently. You don't have to pretend here. You hesitate. Do I pretend in the city? Lucius gives you a small look, not mocking, not judgmental, just recognizing. We all do, they say. There's something frighteningly honest about that, and grounding. You scratch the dirt with your sandal. You come here often. Lucius lightly rolls the loaf of bread in their hand like a toy. Not lately. Life gets busy, but you reminded me. Me? You echo. Lucius shrugs, though the gesture feels weighted with honesty. You walk like someone who sees things. I don't know if that means you walk awkwardly, thoughtfully, or like someone who forgot how to lift their feet, but I'll take it. A bird darts overhead, a branch sways, A breeze whispers something in Latin you'll never translate because sometimes feelings don't require vocabulary. You both sit, not facing each other, not directly interacting, just occupying space in harmony. Neither of you tries to fill the moment with forced dialogue, you simply exist. Time stretches, not in an exciting way, not in a dramatic way, but in a comfortable way. The kind of time that feels heavy and soft, like wool blankets in winter. Lucius eventually stands and brushes dust from their tunic. Same time tomorrow? You pretend to consider it. You give a leisurely shrug. Possibly. Lucius doesn't press. They just nod. As you part ways, something inside your chest feels surprisingly steady. Not butterflies, not fireworks, just warmth. A small calm. A place that will stay with you even when you walk back into noise. You didn't plan this path. You didn't expect an orchard. You didn't intend to find a place where you don't lie. And yet, here you are. A quiet path. A quiet companion. A quiet truth. Hidden beneath fig trees and Roman dust. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in gently, the way ivy takes over a wall. One morning, you wake up and realize you're already thinking about the orchard before you've even washed your face. Not in a frantic way, not in a romantic tragedy way, more in the way you think about breakfast, inevitable, comfortable, expected. You tell yourself you're not planning to meet Lucius. You tell yourself you're simply going for your morning walk because you are a responsible citizen who values exercise and fresh figs. Yes, a noble Roman, the patron of nature, not someone waiting for another person's footsteps. The walk begins like every other morning. Your sandals crunch on the dusty stone of the street. You pass a baker sprinkling flour like he's salting the earth. You pass two women arguing over whether a tunic shade is sand beige or dust beige, which is hilarious because Rome invented opinion. When you reach the orchard path, you pretend you're surprised to see Lucius standing by the fig tree. You give the same casual nod you give every morning, the, "Oh, fancy that, how utterly accidental" nod. Lucius returns the same nod, equally casual, equally unconvincing. Neither of you mentions that this is now a routine. Neither of you mentions that you have developed a shared internal clock. Neither of you mentions that accidental is clearly dead and buried under the fig tree roots by this point. Today, Lucius has brought a small scroll. Not a full book, just parchment tied with a piece of twine. "I found something," they say, lifting it slightly as if to emphasize, "Not that I'm prepared for your arrival or anything." You raise a brow. "Am I allowed to ask what it is?" Lucius shrugs. "You'll have to sit down to find out." So you both sit, like always, on the patch of quiet earth that has somehow become your spot, though neither of you will ever say those words. Lucius unties the twine and unrolls the parchment. It's a map, a hand-drawn map of old Rome, from years ago, before expansions, before additional settlements, before the city swallowed its surroundings like a hungry animal. "It was my father's," Lucius explains. "He used this to plan where he would read with me. This orchard was marked even then." You trace the ink with your fingertip. The lines are faded, worn, touched by time. The orchard isn't labeled as orchard. Instead, a tiny symbol sits there. Two little leaves drawn side by side. "Why this spot?" you ask softly. Lucius replies, "He said some places make silence feel comfortable, not empty." That lands in your chest like a quiet truth. There are dozens of things you could talk about: politics, festivals, the absurd price of olives this week, but you don't. Words suddenly feel like clutter. You both choose silence, which is now your preferred language. After a long pause, Lucius rolls the parchment back up. You can tell it means something to them, not because of sentimentality, but because of what it represents: continuity, softness, something beyond the piles of marble and war stories Rome usually celebrates. You walk deeper into the orchard together. The sounds of distant merchants are faint now. Birds rustle the trees. Air moves over your arms gently, like a quiet greeting. At some point, your hands brush. Not holding, not dramatic, just brushing. A feather touch, enough to notice, not enough to acknowledge. You both pretend it didn't happen. You pause by a tree heavy with fruit, and Lucius reaches up for one. They miscalculate, and the fruit slips from their grasp and lands squarely on your foot. You stare at the smushed fruit like it's a profound betrayal. Lucius stares at your foot like they're deciding whether to apologize or laugh. Then Lucius says, "Sorry, the fruit was staging a rebellion." You blurt, "It won!" You both laugh, not the loud head-thrown-back laughter of festival goers, but the soft kind that lingers in the throat and makes the chest feel warm. Then comes the moment. Not a big, dramatic moment, not a confessional, just this. Lucius sits down again, and you sit beside them without hesitation. Not because you agreed, not because it was planned, but because at this point, routine is more honest than denial. You stay there until the sunlight shifts, turning leaves pale gold. The orchard smells like ripe fruit and summer dust. A bird hops near you like it's judging your emotional decisions. You ignore it. After a while, Lucius stands up and brushes off their tunic. Same time tomorrow? You make your usual show of pretending to consider. Possibly. Lucius smiles, not with lips but with eyes. Possibly has become predictable. You scoff lightly. Predictable is an ugly word. Lucius tilts his head. Routine? You nod. Better. Routine, pattern, familiarity, without admission. You part ways again, walking back into the city's rising noise. And even though neither of you will ever confess it, you both know this is no longer accidental. This is chosen. Unspoken, but chosen. There are things you tell other people, and there are things you tell no one. And then there are things you don't even admit to yourself, yet somehow they spill onto parchment when no one is watching. Today, after returning from your walk, you do something that even you would call embarrassing if someone caught you. You take out your private scroll, the one you started years ago, not as a diary, because that would make you sentimental and vulnerable, and Rome frowns upon both, but as something you called observations. Yes, that's the word you used. Observations. Clinical, detached, scientific, absolutely not emotional. Except, today your observation is more like, Lucius has a habit of tilting their head when they pretend not to care. It makes silence feel friendly. You stare at the words. You narrow your eyes. You cringe like you have swallowed a lemon whole. Who wrote that? Definitely not you. Definitely not someone who has feelings. Definitely not someone who is in danger of becoming soft. You cross it out. Then you rewrite it again, because crossing out doesn't mean erasing, it just means hiding, and you're good at hiding. You dip your stylus again and write a new line. Shared routine equals comfort, not affection, definitely not affection. You underline definitely 3 times, which is exactly what someone does when their subconscious is contradicting them. Congratulations! You are now arguing with yourself in ink. You try to step away from the scroll, but your legs don't listen. You sit down again. You add one more line. I don't want the walks to stop. You stare at that one the longest. It's the sort of truth that feels safe only when hidden. You roll the scroll back up carefully, as if the parchment might explode from the emotion printed on it. You tuck it away where no nosy Roman relative could find it, because the last thing you need is someone saying, "Ah, young love," while pinching your cheek like you're a child. No thank you. Evening comes. You eat dinner absent-mindedly. You try reading, but every few sentences you imagine Lucius saying, "Same time tomorrow?" You fall asleep earlier than usual because your mind is quiet but not empty. It is held lightly, like carrying a feather, not a burden. The next morning, you wake before sunrise, which is ridiculous. No one wakes before sunrise unless they're a baker or preparing for war. You justify it to yourself by saying you wanted fresh air and a chance to see the early vendors. Very logical, very Roman, absolutely not because you're eager to see Lucius. You walk your familiar route. Your feet now know exactly where to go. You could probably do it blindfolded, and you would still avoid every stone that juts out of the path. When you reach the orchard, Lucius is already there, and they look slightly startled, which means they arrived early too. They pretend they didn't, you pretend they didn't. A perfect hypocrisy. Lucius pulls something from his satchel, not the map this time, but a small carved pin, shaped like a leaf. This fell from the map scroll. I thought I lost it. He twirls it between his fingers. It belonged to my father. You nod, understanding the importance without needing words. There is a softness in Lucius' eyes, not sadness, not nostalgia exactly, but something like quiet memory. Lucius suddenly looks embarrassed and slips the pin into your palm. I want you to hold it, he murmurs, as if giving you something fragile. You blink. Me? Why? Lucius shrugs, suddenly awkward, because I trust you won't lose it. You hold the pin like it's a tiny piece of Rome carved out of time. You don't thank him, not because you're rude, but because gratitude would make the moment too obvious. You say nothing. Lucius says nothing. The silence stretches, not heavy, not uncomfortable, just honest. You return home after the walk, and the moment with the pen echoes in your chest like footsteps in quiet halls. The first thing you do is grab your scroll, your secret scroll, the one no one will ever see. You unroll it and write slowly, deliberately. Today, Lucius trusted me with something precious. I didn't know how heavy meaning could feel. You stare at the words. Then you add, I hope they never stop trusting me. You don't cross this one out. You let it stay. Ink doesn't lie. You wake up the next morning feeling oddly lighter, like someone rearranged the furniture in your heart while you slept. You glance toward the spot where the leaf-shaped pin rests, right on your table, positioned exactly where you can see it without actually admitting you've been staring at it. You don't touch it. Not yet. Because touching it feels like crossing a line you haven't acknowledged exists. Today, as you walk toward the orchard, you tell yourself you're not hurrying, you're simply walking briskly, for health, for discipline. Yes, exactly. Very Roman, very logical. Lucius is there again, doing something you've never seen before, hesitating. They shift their weight from one foot to the other, hands clasped behind their back, like someone preparing to speak, but not sure how. So, Lucius begins, staring off into the distance. There's something I never told you. You nod, giving the universal Roman sign for, go ahead if you must, which is a polite version of, I'm nosy and dying to know. Lucius sits down on the edge of the path where the grass grows wild and soft. You sit beside them, knees almost touching. That almost matters more than if they did. When I was younger, Lucius starts slowly, I used to walk with my mother here. She loved the orchard, said the trees held stories like old companions. You murmur, "She sounds kind." Lucius smiles, and it's the most vulnerable expression you've ever seen on their face, like a crack in armor, but in a beautiful way. She was. She always said the best conversations happen without speaking. You pause, then joke lightly, "Well, then we've been having excellent conversations." Lucius gives a soft laugh, almost shy. "Yes, we have." Silence folds around you both, but this time, silence isn't empty. It's full, like it's carrying something careful and precious. Lucius turns slightly towards you. "I haven't really talked about her, not to anyone, not since she passed." You don't respond with pity. That would ruin everything. Instead, you let your shoulder tilt slightly closer, just enough for Lucius to feel presence without pressure. "Do you think she'd approve of our walks?" you ask. Lucius doesn't hesitate. Absolutely. She believed people find each other in simple ways, like stepping stones across a stream. You feel something shift in you, something like intention, something like connection, something like, "Oh, this matters." You look at Lucius, not directly, that would be too bold, but slightly toward their direction, enough to catch the shape of their quiet smile. The walk continues, slower than usual, not because you're tired, but because neither of you wants it to end. Halfway down the path, Lucius stops beside a tree you don't usually notice, a smaller fig tree, its leaves shaped differently from the rest. "This was her favorite," Lucius said softly. "She named it Aurea, golden." You're about to ask why, when Lucius adds, "Not because of fruit, because of memories." You stand there with them, letting the idea settle. And then, very gently, Lucius leans closer, not enough to be startling, not enough to be a declaration, but enough to say, "This tree reminds me of you." Your heartbeat decides to audition for gladiator games. You somehow keep your voice calm. Why? Lucius shrugs, looking adorably uncomfortable. "Because you make ordinary things feel golden." You stare at them, silently thanking every Roman god in the pantheon for not striking you down with lightning for feeling this much. Then you do something bold. You place your hand on the tree trunk, mirroring Lucius's gesture. It's not physical intimacy between you, but it's proximity through something shared, a symbolic closeness. Lucius watches your hand, then looks up at you with eyes that say far more than the words they allow themselves. You say softly, "Maybe memories grow like branches, slowly, quietly." Lucius nods. "Then I hope these keep growing." You walk again, even slower now, like the path itself has become something sacred. Halfway down the path, Lucius stops beside a tree you don't usually notice, a smaller fig tree, its leaves shaped differently from the rest. "This was her favorite," Lucius said softly. "I think the walk is no longer just a walk." Then one final truth, the kind that doesn't tremble or hide. Maybe this is what intention feels like. You set down the stylus. You don't cross out a single thing, because ink tells the truth, and today, you're brave enough not to erase it. You start the day with the familiar walk planned, though of course you pretend to yourself that you have no expectations. You convince your mind that you're just stretching your legs, breathing fresh air, and browsing the orchard the way a scholar browses dusty scrolls, with absolute neutrality. But that's a lie, and you know it, because your sandals are tied neatly, your hair is fixed just a little nicer, and you're wearing the tunic that always fits just a bit better than the others, for no reason, of course. You reach the orchard path earlier than usual, but Lucius isn't there yet. You sit on the low stone wall, pretending you were admiring the figs, though really you're admiring anticipation itself. After what feels like hours, but is probably 4 minutes, You hear footsteps, their footsteps, steady and familiar. But today, Lucius looks different. Not upset, not distant, just thoughtful, like they're holding something made of words they're not sure how to carry. "Morning," they say quietly. You nod. "Morning." You both walk, neither of you speaking, and the silence isn't awkward. It's expectant, like the pause before someone unwraps something fragile. Then, just a little way down the path, something slips from Lucius's hand, a folded piece of parchment. You pick it up out of pure reflex. "Lucius, you dropped," but as you look down at it, you see your name. Not your formal name, not your title, just your name, written the way only someone who has learned how to think of you would write it. Lucius freezes like a statue caught by sculptor's chisel. You hold the parchment in midair, not opening it, not handing it back, just staring at the fact that it exists. Lucius starts, voice nervous in a way you've never heard before. It wasn't meant to fall." You look at them gently. "I didn't read it." Lucius breathes out slowly. "I know, but you could have." You shrug with a faint smile. "But I didn't." They take a step closer, eyes soft. "That's why this matters." Lucius finally takes the parchment from your hands, folds it more carefully, then slips it beneath their belt, where things that matter stay safe. You walk again, but something has changed. The distance between you, once polite, now feels deliberately smaller. As you approach the marketplace road, Lucius pauses. "I wrote that because..." Their voice trails off, like someone approaching the edge of a cliff but refusing to jump. "You don't have to explain," you say. Lucius gives a tiny nod. "No, I want to." Your eyebrows raise just slightly, a gesture that says, "I'm listening." Lucius glances toward the bustling market where vendors are shouting prices and old women argue about figs versus olives like it's an Olympic sport. "I didn't know how to say things out loud, so I wrote them down. I do that sometimes." You smile. "So you write the things you can't speak?" Lucius looks at you as if surprised you understand. "Exactly." There's a pause, not heavy, hopeful. Then you speak, honesty slipping through your voice before you can rehearse it. "That's how I remember things too." Lucius tilts their head. "You do?" You nod. "I write, small notes, not important ones, just thoughts." Lucius's eyes soften in a way that might as well be a hug. "Maybe they're more important than you think." You stand there in the edge of the busy market street, neither of you stepping forward as though crossing that street might change things more than either of you are prepared for. Lucius reaches into their belt again as if preparing to hand you the parchment. Your heart speeds up, ready, waiting. But instead, they pause and shake their head gently. "Not yet," Lucius whispers. "But soon." You nod like that's the right answer, because it is. You both walk back towards the orchard as if the market is too loud for the quiet thing growing between you. You walk side by side, and the unspoken becomes comfortable. As you return home, you sit with the memory of the parchment. You don't need to know what's written yet. The fact that it exists, that's enough for now. Tonight, when you settle to write in your scroll, the ink flows freely. Lucius writes things they cannot say. "I understand that more than I expected." You pause, then add, "There is something in the parchment that will eventually reach me. Not today, and that's okay." Then, because the truth wants to stretch its legs, you write, "Maybe love is just patience with a heartbeat." You close the scroll, and for the first time you don't feel alone with your words. Not really. You don't see Lucius for 2 days. It shouldn't matter. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. You tried to believe it doesn't matter. But your feet walk to the orchard anyway. You pretend you're just stretching, as if Rome's dust itself is medicine. You pretend you're just curious about figs, or about whether the old farmer has sharpened his sickle, or whether the pigeons finally declared war on the fruit stall. Anything but the real reason. On the third day, Lucius appears. No dramatic shouting, no frantic explanation, just them, walking toward you with that gentle, "sorry I took so long" expression that doesn't need words. You exhale through your nose in a way that is decidedly not relief, even though it definitely is. Lucius sits beside you on the stone wall, the same spot where the parchment slipped days ago. The birds chatter above, too loud for the quiet moment, but somehow perfect. Lucius reaches into his belt. Your heartbeat betrays you, skipping a rhythm like a musician too tired to keep tempo. They take out the parchment, folded, worn at the edges, a little smoother from being held too carefully. They don't hand it to you. Instead, they open it, and they start to read. Their voice is soft, lower than usual, as if they're reading something sacred. It seems strange that we walk because the city is noisy. We say nothing because words are loud, and yet I wait for the quiet of your footsteps more than anything. You look down at your hands, pretending to inspect your fingernails. You wouldn't survive direct eye contact right now. Lucius continues. I don't know if this is friendship or something beyond it. I don't know how to measure something I don't understand. But I know I want it to continue, whatever it is. The world becomes very still. Even the pigeons seem to pause mid-peck. You swallow, because your throat has apparently turned to sand. You read that very calmly, you manage to say, though your voice cracks like a badly baked loaf. Lucius smiles, faint and warm. I practiced. You laugh, not a loud laugh, just a soft, embarrassed puff, but Lucius hears it like a victory. You want to say something meaningful, something elegant, something poetic. Instead, you blurt, I like walking with you. Lucius looks at you like that might have been the finest lyric Homer ever forgot to write. Then Lucius asks the gentlest question. May I give you something? You tilt your head. What? Lucius reaches into the parchment and pulls out a tiny petal, pressed, dried, delicate. It came from the orchard path. It reminded me of silence that isn't empty, he explains. You stare at the tiny thing, simple, fragile, but impossibly meaningful. You whisper, Can I keep it? Lucius nods. That's why I brought it. Your chest feels warm, like someone lit a lantern somewhere you didn't know lanterns could be placed. You slide the petal into your pocket. It's safe, you say. Lucius replies, That's all I wanted. You both sit quietly, letting the moment breathe. You almost say thank you, but Lucius shakes her head before you can. No, she says softly, don't thank me. Just walk with me. You stand, brushing dust off your tunic in a totally unnecessary and overly dramatic way. Lucius pretends not to notice. You walk, not talking, not needing to. Your steps are close but not touching, close enough that strangers might assume you are lovers, but also close enough that strangers might assume you are merely friends. The truth sits somewhere between definitions, quiet, patient, content to unfold slowly. By the time you reach the end of the path, the sun is dipping low, and you feel the first hint of something new forming. Trust. Maybe the kind of trust that grows so gradually you only realize it exists long after it has rooted itself. You part ways gently. No dramatic goodbye, no clutching each other like doomed lovers in a tragedy. Just the simple understanding that you will see each other again. As you turn toward home, your hand drifts to your pocket. The petal is there, and suddenly, all the loud parts of the city feel far away. You walk slower, because sometimes slowing down is the only way to hold meaning without crushing it.
You don't plan it, but you show up earlier than usual the next morning,
Not because you're eager, of course not. Definitely not. You just happen to wake up absurdly early, and your feet just happen to wander in this direction, and the sun just happened to cooperate as if it had signed a contract with destiny. You wait near the fig orchard, leaning against the old stone wall that now feels like a shared inheritance. The morning breeze smells faintly of olives and dust, the kind that settles into your clothes and makes everything smell like a marketplace. Lucius arrives. Not with a dramatic entrance, not with trumpets, not with grand declarations. They just walk up, quiet and casual, as if yesterday's confession was merely a footnote, a little scribble in a margin. You greet each other like people who didn't just emotionally implode inside their own rib cages. Lucius looks at you with that sincere half-smile that has become, accidentally, your favorite landscape. "Would you like to walk a little farther today?" they ask. And you nod, because saying, "Yes, I would follow you to the ends of the empire if you asked," might be a tad dramatic even for ancient Rome. So you walk, farther than usual. The noise of the city fades, replaced by the quiet rustling of trees and the distant sound of hooves on old stone. The path curves gently, leading toward a small clearing where grass bends lazily in the wind. You've never walked this far with anyone, not even yourself. Lucius stops, sits on a rock that looks like it's been waiting centuries just for this moment, and pats the space beside them. You sit. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that your sleeves brush every now and then, which is somehow worse than actually touching because now you have to think about not thinking about touching. Lucius unfolds the parchment again, but this time they don't read. They hand it to you. "Will you write something?" they ask softly. You blink. "Me? Write? On this?" Lucius nods. "It's only half finished. I want your half." You stare at the parchment like it might combust from awkward pressure. Your throat tightens, your palms sweat, and your brain decides to empty itself of all coherent thought like a scroll thrown into a fountain. "What do I write?" "Whatever you want," Lucius answers gently. Which is precisely the problem, because when someone says, "Write anything," your mind immediately supplies nothing, just blankness and panic. You stare at the empty space on the parchment, the room where your words will live forever. You finally write, "I walk because you walk." That is enough. Lucius watches you write. They don't speak, don't react, don't interrupt. They let you finish. Let the ink dry. Let your heart stop pretending. When you hand the parchment back, Lucius holds it with both hands, as if you signed a treaty or performed a miracle. They don't make a grand speech, they just sit there in silence, letting your words settle like quiet dust in warm sunlight. You both breathe, slow, comfortable. Then Lucius does something unexpected. They take out a small wax seal, shaped like a rising sun, the kind used only for personal letters, the kind that means, "This matters more than everything I've never said." Lucius presses the wax onto the parchment, sealing both halves together, yours and theirs. When the seal hardens, Lucius slides the parchment back into its leather pouch and ties it shut. Not tightly, but with the gentleness of someone tying a promise. Then, as if this day wasn't already approaching dangerous levels of emotional chaos, Lucius looks at you and says the quietest thing you've ever heard. This is the first page of something. You try to respond, you really do, but words have apparently packed their bags and left the empire, and all you can do is breathe out an awkward half-laugh. Lucius doesn't push. They stand and brush dust off their tunic. You do the same, pretending like brushing dust is a competitive sport you're winning. You start walking back toward the city. Side by side, not touching, but you notice your steps match perfectly, like a rhythm you never had to rehearse. The orchard appears again, the wall, the pigeons, the farmer, the usual chaos of everyday life. But your heart feels strangely calm. And that calm is the kind that doesn't come from routine, it comes from meaning. Just as you near the end of the path, Lucius stops. They don't turn to you grammatically. They just glance sideways and ask with the quiet confidence of someone who already knows the answer. Walk again tomorrow? You pretend to think, rubbing your chin in fake philosophical agony. Then you say, I walk because you walk. Of course tomorrow. Lucius smiles, a smile that doesn't belong to romance novels or playwrights or poets. Just a real one. A small, quiet, ancient smile, and it means everything. You don't realize how much the walks mean to you until the day one of them doesn't happen. Morning arrives. Sunlight slides lazily over the rooftops of Rome. You head to the orchard path, expecting the calm of routine, expecting Lucius leaning against the same tree, expecting a nod or a small smile or some joke about pigeons. But Lucius isn't there. You wait. You pretend to admire the figs. You pretend the morning breeze is interesting. You pretend you're early. Then you pretend you're not worried. You go home. Next day, again, you return. Lucius is still not there. Your stomach twists like someone folded it badly, like the parchment you both wrote on. The silence is heavier than usual, not gentle silence, but silence with edges. You walk anyway. But the path feels wrong when you walk alone, like stepping into a memory without permission. On the third day, you start imagining a dozen ridiculous possibilities. They left Rome. They were conscripted. They were captured by thieves. They were eaten by exceptionally aggressive figs. Each idea worse than the last. On the fourth day, you bring the sealed parchment with you, tucked inside your tunic. You're not sure why. Maybe you think holding it will magically summon Lucius. It doesn't. You sit on the stone wall and let frustration simmer. How dare they vanish like that? How dare they leave you worrying like a foolish poet losing ink? How dare they make you realize just how much they matter? You mutter to yourself like a dramatic philosopher crossed with a pigeon. This is either a crisis or a comedy. Rome hasn't decided yet. On the fifth day, it rains in the morning. Not the pleasant drizzle you once shared, a real Roman downpour, the kind that slaps you in the face and ruins every attempt at dignity. You walk anyway. If silence had weight, you're carrying a marble statue on your chest. The sixth day arrives. You don't even pretend not to rush. You don't even pretend not to care. You hurry there, borderline running, as if you're racing some invisible thing. And then finally, Lucius stands there, under the same fig tree, waiting. Their hair is slightly damp, as if they've been there for a while. Their shoulders slump with apology. Their eyes hold something tender, something vulnerable. You stop walking, not because your legs want to, but because your emotions crash into you like an ox cart. Lucius steps closer, cautiously, like approaching an injured animal. "I'm sorry," they say, voice barely more than a whisper. You don't yell, you don't demand explanations, you don't hit them with a fig. You just say, "I thought you vanished." Lucius shakes her head. "I was ill, nothing serious, just days I couldn't leave my bed." Your shoulders drop with relief, the kind of relief that comes suddenly, so strong you almost laugh or cry or fall into the grape barrels. You settle for leaning against the wall. Then something strange happens. Lucius looks ashamed. You don't know why until they speak. "I didn't tell you. I should have told you." It hits you, not like lightning, not like drama, but like truth. The walks are no longer accidents. The walks are no longer coincidences. They are commitments. Silently made, quietly understood, deeply felt. So you answer with the most honest thing you've ever said. "You don't owe me anything, but I felt your absence, and that means something." Lucius's eyes soften, the kind of softness that speaks without speaking. They sit next to you, close enough for your shoulders to almost touch, but not quite. You sit there together, breathing the same ancient Roman air, letting the tension dissolve like sand slipping through fingers. Then Lucius does something small but monumental. He takes your hand. Not dramatically, not romantically, not desperately, just gently. Like acknowledging something both of you already knew. And you don't pull away. You don't panic. You don't make a joke about figs. You just let your fingers rest there, in silence, warm, steady, human. The seventh day arrives, like dawn after a long night. This time, when you walk beside each other, it doesn't feel like two lives brushing by accidentally. It feels like two paths merging, slowly, patiently, quietly. A small shift, invisible to everyone else, but enormous to you. The next morning, something is noticeably different. You can't point to it, you can't describe it, but the air around the orchard feels softer, calmer, as if the universe itself decided to exhale. Maybe it's the way Lucius walks beside you, not drifting at arm's distance, not pretending to be casual, just present, fully, quietly present. You don't say much at first, you don't need to. Words feel unnecessary, like decorations you'd only add if silence wasn't already beautiful. Finally, Lucius speaks. "I kept rereading what you wrote." You blink. "In the what?" "Parchment." Lucius nods gently. "I read it every day I was ill." Your stomach twists, not painfully, but like someone just nudged your heart with a very tiny chisel. You stare at the gravel beneath your sandals, unwilling to let your face show that level of emotional meltdown. Lucius continues, "Your words, they reminded me I wasn't alone." There's a pause, but a comfortable one, like standing under a shared shade. Then Lucius adds, "I wrote something too." You turn to them, eyebrows raised so high you could catch rain. You wrote more?" Lucius gives a small, nervous smile, a rare expression on someone usually so composed. "You can read it," they offer, opening the leather pouch. But you shake your head. "No, you read it. I don't think my nerves can survive today." Lucius laughs, a tiny, broken laugh, like they're surprised they can even make that sound. Then he unfolds the parchment and reads aloud, voice steady. "I do not know if what grows between us is love, or something deeper, or something without a name. I only know that I want the next walk, and the next, and the next, until steps become years." You swallow. You don't respond immediately, you just breathe. Lucius isn't looking at you, both of you stare ahead, as if staring at nothing makes the feelings easier to hold. So you answer slowly, carefully, not ruining the moment. "I think steps already became years. We just hadn't said it. Lucius exhales in relief, the kind of relief someone releases when the secret they carried turns into shared truth. You walk on, quieter than before, but not awkward. The silence feels full, thick with meaning, like bread rising in an oven. At one point, Lucius gently bumps your shoulder, a small motion, accidental or intentional, you can't tell, but it sends warmth radiating through your ribs. You stop beneath an overgrown archway leading to a small abandoned garden. You've never walked here before, or maybe you passed it without seeing. The vines twist lazily over cracked stone, sunlight poking through like shy confessions. Lucius steps forward and sits on a broken column, motioning for you to join. You do. Lucius pulls out a small charcoal stub, worn down to its final inch, and marks the parchment again. I am afraid to call this love, but more afraid to lose it. You lean closer, reading the words, and softly, like the whisper of a century, you mutter, "It's love, just quiet love." Lucius freezes, not in fear, not in shock, but like someone letting a word settle into their bones. Then you add, half joking, "The loud type never lasts. The quiet one, maybe it does." Lucius smiles so faintly, it's almost a secret. You take the charcoal from them, your fingers brushing theirs, not dramatic, not faded, not theatrical, just soft, human contact. You write your line beneath theirs, "Quiet love is enough for me." Lucius' breath hitches, barely noticeable, but you hear it. They close the parchment slowly, carefully, reverently, like sealing something sacred. Then the two of you sit in the garden, shoulder to shoulder, letting the day pass without rushing. The sunlight warms the stone, birds flutter overhead, and for a brief moment the world outside Rome, the chaos, the politics, the trades, the noise, disappears. It's just you and Lucius, breathing the same air, making history no one will write down. A forgotten love, not meant for epic poems, not meant for the stage, not meant for marble monuments, just meant for these stolen moments. A love carried in footsteps, in quiet glances, in words scribbled on parchment that no emperor will ever read. You don't say, "I love you," neither does Lucius. You don't need to. It's there. In silence. In ink. In shared footsteps. A love Rome never noticed, and maybe never will. But a love that matters. To you. To Lucius. And maybe to time itself.
You don't realize it until days pass, but your footsteps have begun to change. Not just direction or pace, something deeper. You notice that when you and Lucius walk, you walk in ways that match without effort. Steps align, pauses synchronize, breaths fall into rhythm. If someone saw from afar, they might assume you rehearsed it. But you didn't. It just happened, quietly, naturally. Almost like the universe decided it before either of you did. Today, when you meet, there's no parchment, no charcoal, no dramatic conversation waiting to burst. Instead, Lucius hands you a fig from the orchard, small, ripe, almost splitting with sweetness. You take it, tearing it open. The juice stains your fingertips like ink. You both eat silently. Lucius wipes his hands with the back of his tunic. You wipe yours on your sleeve, a method that could not be described as hygienic. Lucius pretends not to judge. You begin walking. After a moment, Lucius says, "The garden, the place we sat. Would you like to go there again?" You nod. Not because you want to, which you do, but because you need to, in that quiet way humans sometimes need things they can't explain, like sunlight on cold mornings, or parchment pressed flat, or small confessions whispered between fig trees. The path curves again. You reach the garden, its broken stone arch greeting you the way a tired host greets familiar guests. You sit beside Lucius, not touching, but close enough that the boundary between alone and together becomes thin. Lucius takes a breath. Not dramatic, not trembling, just steady. They say, "I was thinking about how people measure things." You tilt your head. "Like merchants?" Lucius shakes her head. "Like hearts." "Oh, wonderful. Nothing terrifying at all there." They continue softly. "People think love has to be loud, that it must be declared, documented, witnessed. But maybe quiet things last longer." You don't speak. You don't need to. Lucius looks at their hands, rough on the edges from parchment, soft in the middle from care. Then, "I don't want to rush what this is. I don't want to name it before it's ready. I just want to keep walking." You let that settle. A slow, thoughtful silence. Then you answer with the simplest truth your heart has ever produced. "Then let's walk, as long as it takes." Lucius smiles, not wide, not eager, just calm. The kind of smile someone wears when something inside them finally stops running. The wind shifts gently, brushing through the vines. Sunlight flickers across Lucius's face, tracing the line of their jaw, the curve of their cheek, the tired softness of someone who has lived carefully. Your fingers brush theirs, very lightly, a touch so small it might be mistaken for accident. Lucius doesn't move away. You don't either. Your hands rest there, side by side, touching only at the knuckles. Not romance, not possession, not dramatic promise. Just presence. Lucius speaks again, voice slow, thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what will happen if the walks change, if life changes?" You shrug. Everything changes, but not everything breaks. Lucius considers that, a long pause, like they're letting the words ripen. Then, "Do you promise to walk even if paths shift?" You almost choke on your own heartbeat. Then you nod. "I promise to walk even if the path isn't straight, even if we get lost sometimes." Lucius nods too, like something sacred just passed between you both, something no Roman historian will ever record, something no scroll will preserve. Then Lucius surprises you, not with words, not with parchment, just with a quiet truth. "Walking with you is the first thing in my life that hasn't felt like waiting." You close your eyes for a long moment, letting that settle in a place deeper than thought. You stay there until the sun tilts toward the western rooftops. Then you both stand, brushing dust from your tunics like emotional gladiators, pretending everything is normal. You begin walking back. Steps synced. Hearts quiet. Love present but unspoken, like a candle glowing behind stone walls. When you part at the end of the path, Lucius doesn't say goodbye. They simply say, "Tomorrow." And you answer, "Tomorrow." The word feels like promise. Not dramatic, not poetic, not monumental, just real, quiet, ancient. Yours. You don't talk about what the walks have become, not directly. That would ruin something delicate, like clay still drying in the sun. But you live it. You feel it. The path has begun to shape your days, not dramatically, not like you reorganized your entire life, or abandoned duties, or started reciting poetry at fountains. No, Rome would laugh at that. But you notice small changes. You plan meals so they end before the orchard hour. You leave your tasks half-finished because you'd rather finish them after the walk. You feel restless when you arrive too early, and embarrassed when you arrive even 1 minute late. You don't call it love, neither does Lucius. But it's there, growing like ivy through the cracks of stone. Today feels different, not louder, just deeper, settled. You walk side by side,
your shoulders nearly brushing. The chatter of vendors fades, the clatter of market carts dissolves into a calmer hush as you reach the orchard. Lucius seems thoughtful, not troubled, thoughtful. "I want to show you something," they say. You raise an eyebrow. "Another fig, or have you upgraded to olives?" Lucius gives the faintest smile. "Just come." You follow. The path shifts slightly, curving into an area you've never explored, a quieter part of the orchard, where the trees grow closer together and sunlight filters like painted gold. Lucius stops at a small stone marker, one that looks forgotten, maybe even unimportant to everyone except whoever placed it. "It's the edge of my family's land," Lucius says softly. "My father kept it, and his father, but they never did much with it." You take a moment. You look around. The space is peaceful, like it's been waiting centuries for someone to notice its beauty. Lucius continues, "I kept thinking, maybe I should plant something here." You tilt your head. "Plant what?" Lucius shrugs, embarrassed. "I don't know, something quiet, something that grows slowly." You smile. "That sounds like us." Lucius freezes, not in fear, not in shock, just stunned that the truth fell into the open so naturally. You don't correct yourself, you don't take it back, you just let it sit there between you, warm and real. Lucius kneels down beside the stone marker, brushing soil gently with their fingertips. You kneel beside them, the ground cool beneath your knees. "What would we plant?" you ask. Lucius looks up. "Something that lasts." You search the ground, not that you expect flowers to magically appear, but then you notice a small sprout, fragile and new, pushing through the soil. Tiny, modest, alive. "A wild bloom," Lucius murmurs. "It wasn't planted, it just came." Something in your chest tightens, not the painful kind, but the kind that signals meaning. Lucius doesn't pluck it, doesn't move it. They just trace around it with their fingers, as if honoring it. Then they look at you. "Maybe we don't need to plan what grows. Maybe we just let it." You nod. "That sounds right." Silence settles between you. Not awkward, not hesitant, just still. The kind of silence that rooms try to imitate. You sit back on your heels, and Lucius sits beside you. The sprout stands between you like a quiet witness to something forming. Lucius speaks again, voice softer than the breeze. "I don't think love needs monuments or proclamations or carved declarations on marble." You let that sink in. Lucius looks at the sprout, then at you. "I think love can be ordinary, small, but enduring." You answer, "Ordinary things outlive empires." Lucius smiles. Not the polite smile, not the cautious smile, a real one, a smile that acknowledges a truth without making you say it outright. Then Lucius reaches into the leather pouch, not for parchment this time, but for something else. A piece of string. Simple, unadorned. They tie it around the stone marker, a loose knot, easy to remove, but undeniably placed with intention. You ask, "What does that mean?" Lucius replies, "This means this matters, but it doesn't need to be loud." You sit in the orchard until the shadows grow long. You talk a little, but nothing deep, nothing heavy. You talk about figs and pigeons, and whether the city's fountains will ever stop smelling like fish. You make each other laugh, not dramatically, just gently. When you begin walking back, Lucius walks slightly slower, or maybe you walk slightly slower than usual. Either way, your steps match. At the top of the path, when you part, Lucius says, "Until tomorrow," and you answer, without hesitation, "Until tomorrow." Not as routine, not as habit, but as something chosen, not rushed, not named, just lived. Quietly, like footsteps, like years, like love that doesn't need to declare itself to exist.
The next weeks aren't dramatic. No shouting, no declarations, no lightning bolts from Jupiter, no theatrical scenes worthy of a tragic poet. Just walks. Quiet ones. Steady ones. Ones that feel like breathing, like resting, like belonging. You and Lucius meet under the same orchard trees, wander along the same path, sometimes talking, sometimes not, sometimes laughing, sometimes simply sharing silence. Sometimes you sit near the tiny sprout, watching it grow in its stubborn, patient way. And Rome continues. Market noises, sandal scuffs, fountain splashes, gossiping neighbors, political arguments that aren't nearly as interesting as people pretend. But those things feel far away when you're walking beside Lucius. One afternoon, as you settle beneath the broken arch in the garden, Lucius reaches into their pouch, not for parchment, not for charcoal, not for some dramatic confession. They take out the string, the same one tied around the stone marker. They unwind it gently, smoothing the bend marks, letting it stretch in the air like a small memory becoming present again. Lucius doesn't speak. They hand the string to you. No ceremony, no instructions, no explanation. You don't tie it around your wrist. You don't tie it around theirs. You don't tie it around the sprout. You tie it around the leather pouch that holds both pieces of writing. Lucius watches, eyes soft. That seems right, they say. And it does. Because whatever this is, whatever you have built, it isn't something to declare or claim. It isn't something to brandish or display. It's something to keep, quietly, tenderly, steadily. Later, you stand with Lucius, staring at the orchard path as the sun lowers toward the horizon, painting long shadows across ancient stone. Lucius speaks softly. Do you ever wonder how long we'll walk? You nod. Years, probably. Lucius smiles. Years sound reasonable. You both know the truth. It already has been years. Not in time, but in feeling, in meaning. In the slow, steady rhythm of footsteps that don't need much else. And so, without speaking, without naming, without turning the moment into spectacle, you both make an unspoken vow to keep walking, to keep choosing, to keep holding on to something ordinary and enduring. Something that doesn't need fanfare or marble inscriptions. Something that doesn't need to be immortal to matter. Just love, in the quiet, ancient way. A promise made not in words or ink or ceremonies, but in presence, in footsteps. You don't say, "I love you." You don't need to. Rome will forget this story. History will overlook it. No scroll will ever record it. But the orchard knows. The sprout knows. Your footsteps know. And Lucius knows. That is enough.